the chapter, The United States and the World, we see how the lecturer defines and explains USA's relationship to the world. In that lecture, we learned the definition of hard power and soft power. The United States displays her hard power through economic sanctions against other countries and flexing military muscles. On the other hand, soft power is an ability to attract or persuade others to respond to our requests through dialogue or shared values. As a citizen in a global village, we need to think about Taiwan and the world. But before we can deal with such a big topic, let's start with our neighborhood, the city where we are living now. In other words, the final video project aims to push you to think about how to present yourself to the world. In a globalized world, how to present yourself to make yourself known to others is very important. You will be staying in Kaohsiung for some years. The 4-year college life in Kaohsiung, of course, is a crucial part in your life. How are you going to introduce to others the city Kaohsiung and the area Hamasan? We know that Taiwan had been colonized by Dutch settlers and later by Japan, and had been occupied by Spain for some time. Besides, Taiwan has absorbed various cultures from immigrants. Together with the unique cultures of the indigenous peoples, all these cultures have shaped Taiwan into the country we are now familiar with. Thus, in the final video project is for you to think about the position of Kaohsiung City, specifically the Hamasan area and the world. To help you complete the final project, the teaching assistant of the English Teaching Center made 4 video clips, introducing in each clip South Africa, Hong Kong, Macau, and Malaysia. These 4 places share one common feature with Taiwan, that is, the history of being colonized. In each clip, you will hear some common keywords such as multicultural diversity, multi-ethnic society, cultural mixture, and so on. You can also hear the unique feature of each place. While you are watching the video, please pay attention to the vocabulary used to describe cultures in everyday life. For example, how to describe a place embedded with colonial heritage. Alright, let's start with the clip on South Africa.
In January 2016, John and I took a long overdue trip back to his homeland, Cape Town, South Africa. I had heard so much about the country over the years, so naturally, I was curious and excited to see this magical land and set foot on the oldest continent. South Africa is a multi-ethnic society encompassing a wide variety of cultures, languages, and religions. The Constitution recognizes 11 official languages, and 2 of these languages are of European origin. Afrikaans developed from Dutch and serves as the first language of most white and colored South Africans, whereas English reflects the legacy of British colonialism and is commonly used in public and commercial life. About 80% of South Africans are of sub-Saharan African ancestry, divided among a variety of ethnic groups speaking different Bantu languages, 9 of which have official status. The remaining population consists of Africa's largest communities of European white, Asian Indian, and multiracial colored ancestry. Since 1994, all ethnic and linguistic groups have had political representation in the country's democracy, which is why South Africa is now referred to as the Rainbow Nation, to describe the country's newly developing multicultural diversity. Ryan Jackman, a freelance writer best known for his interest in wildlife and wild places, once wrote, "Africa changes you forever, like nowhere on earth. Once you have been there, you will never be the same. But how do you begin to describe its magic to someone who has never felt it? How can you explain the fascination of this vast, dusty continent, whose oldest roads are elephant paths?" This quote became embodied in my entire trip as I was constantly awed by the breathtakingly gorgeous landscape and the ever-present ethnic and cultural diversity in my surroundings. If you ask me though, I would say that though South Africa is a multi-ethnic country, its people are connected by one pride. Any South African of any race will happily inform you that theirs is the only country where natural wonders defy common understanding, and their pride in their land is transparent. This pride is core to the South African identity, and honestly, these people know what they're talking about when it comes to magnificent beauty. A typical weekend in Cape Town would mean a hike up to Table Mountain, where one enjoys the view from atop one of the new 7 wonders of nature with a cup of coffee and scrumptious carrot cake. Many people find a cozy spot to sit down and gaze upon the city bowl for hours while enjoying the cool mountain wind. South Africa is also the only country in the world to see 2 oceans meet, and also the only country in the world to tan with penguins on a hot February day. Which is why I got a bit carried away in my photographs. Not only can you visit penguins in the South African summer, you can also swim with them at the penguin colony at Golders Beach. Though I don't advise getting too close, these little guys can get pecky. Another essential component to the South African identity is the pride people take in the diversity of their food. South Africans love to cook, eat, and share parts of their diverse ethnic heritage in food markets. These markets were not established for tourists, but for locals to gather after a day of work and partake in various culinary delights. One of the more exotic dishes to try is the Kubu cuisine, which serves crocodile meat among many others. No matter what kind of food choice you make, eating outside is always the best way to enjoy. Cape Town is one of the oldest colonial outposts of the 17th century, which is why so many European influences can be seen throughout the city. Historical vestiges, such as trading posts and post houses, highlight how important the strategic location of Cape Town was to sea trade. Among the earliest settlements in Cape Town were the Dutch, whose nefarious East India Trade Company established base in the city. Though the East India Company has since ceased to be, its old headquarters are maintained as a monument to South African history. Meticulously kept lawns and century-old trees now form the company gardens, which is situated in the center of City Bowl. The company gardens stand testimony to Cape Town's strategic importance and is a monument to the South African Dutch heritage. One can easily spend a day lost in the expansive grounds, gazing at the beautifully maintained buildings while enjoying a crisp cider. Or if you're in a hurry, visit Mandela's Presidential Manor, which is a stone's throw away from the company gardens.
In the next clip, you will join in with the host to have a city tour in Hong Kong. As we know, Hong Kong is known for its fusion of Eastern and Western cultures. You will see Hong Kong showcases its cultural diversity by, for example, cuisines, architectures, and road signs, among others. You may try to make a comparison between Hong Kong and Hamasan, as both respectively have its own profound cultural history and demonstrate to us how the colonial heritage blends into the modern face of an old city.
Hong Kong, the city of convergence where people and cultures clash and blend, where culinary wonders and historical intrigue originate, draws millions to this tiny island year after year. The streets of Hong Kong is a prime example of how East meets West, as relics of its colonial history merge with Cantonese heritage. An afternoon stroll through Hong Kong city center reveals how colonial buildings have been converted to fit their modern surroundings. The Foreign Correspondents Community Building, FCC for example, is one of the few remaining colonial buildings in central Hong Kong. While the club remains active to this day, most of the building is rent out to local businesses. Today, the FCC building is home to some of the most hip and happening bars and restaurants in the Hong Kong night scene, while patrons hoard to get a slice of old world grandeur and sensory delight. Another popular conversion of colonial buildings is the 1881 Heritage Building on the Kowloon Peninsula. Formerly the Marine Police Headquarters, it has now become half heritage museum, half luxury hotel, and full-time tourist attraction. While the first tier of the massive complex now houses some of the world's top brand names, the hotel itself remains much the same as it was a century ago, offering an authentic colonial experience to those who can afford it. In recent years, the building has become the most sought-after wedding venue in Hong Kong, as newlyweds line up for photos in its pristine hallways and restored grounds to celebrate their union. Colonial influence is also evident in the hotel's decor, as opulent chandeliers are paired with Ming vases and Qing furniture, reminding patrons of the hotel's rich cultural history. Tourists also flock to see the coat of arms exhibition in front of the hotel, a monument to Hong Kong's part in the British Navy. Art installations in front of the building further resonate with the island's British history and European influences, changing with every season as themes vary to showcase different aspects of colonial lifestyle. From giant tea sets to Venetian masks, the art installations are extremely photogenic and definitely Instagram-worthy. A third example of colonial heritage made modern is the Pedder Building in the heart of Hong Kong's financial district. Once an investment bank, Pedder Building looks just like any other London exchange house or gentleman club. After its makeover in the 2000s, however, Pedder Building is now home to the Abercrombie & Fitch flagship store, attracting hordes of brand worshippers to its perfume-fragrant doors. Its interior remains true to origins, so the store is worth checking out, even if you aren't interested in the preppy chic Abercrombie & Fitch has to offer. My personal favorite colonial site is the First Western Market Building, conveniently situated between Central and Shanhuan Station. Western Market was originally the first market in Hong Kong to deal in foreign goods, where merchants would set up stalls to sell perfume, muslin, and lace. Parts of the Western Market are rented to German bakeries and stage performance groups, so the market is always teeming with activity from theater goers and tourists. Now the second floor of the Western Market still contains fabric stalls, while the first floor is filled with stands that sell embroidered knickknacks or bamboo fans. A prime example of how cultural diversity is integrated into everyday Hong Kong activity is the road signs. English translated into Mandarin, English translated into Cantonese, Hong Kong streets are difficult to navigate if you try to make sense of the road signs in one language only. For example, Red Pillar is actually Stanley Beach. Causeway Bay, Tong Luo Wan, has an entirely different name. Mongkok is one of the places where Cantonese and English actually correlate to each other. As soon as we left the financial heart of Hong Kong, only pieces of British influence could be seen in the otherwise Canton streets. The Wall Street Journal stands, though closed, advertise both chess games as well as mahjong tournaments.
Speaking of Macau, what is your first impression? Well, glitzy fancy hotels and casinos, yes, but more than being the Las Vegas of Southeast Asia, Macau actually has a profound cultural history. Unlike Hong Kong, which embodies British heritage and Cantonese lifestyle, Macau was colonized by the Portuguese and thus has been influenced by Catholicism. You can see many historical buildings in Macau, for example, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, ruins of St. Paul's, and Catholic churches. Now let's start off on the Heritage Walk, filled with colorful streets and food stands.
If Hong Kong is a blend of Cantonese lifestyle and European influence, then Macau is a combination of the Mediterranean Catholic with Canton living. The Las Vegas of Southeast Asia, Macau streets have so much more to offer than the fast and glitzy gambling it's known for. Colonized by the Portuguese until the early 2000s, Macau was an interesting study in colonial history and Catholic influence. Its crowning jewel, the ruins of St. Paul, stands proudly as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. As with most historical ruins, these ruins were overrun by tourists and Chinese guided groups. What really struck me as diverse was how the ruins contrasted with the modern buildings surrounding it, creating a Mecca in the middle of the city that attracted a pilgrimage, from nuns in habits to toddlers in squeaky shoes. After seeing the spectacular ruins, we came across a miniature wooden carving that was etched into the side of a wall, which was an exquisite replica of St. Paul. From St. Paul, you can take the heritage walk around the city to take in the Portuguese architecture that is rarely seen in this part of the world. On the heritage walk, we saw some opera houses. We also saw government official lodgings. There were lots and lots of Catholic churches. And then we emerged onto Senadao Square, the downtown piazza, reminiscent of idyllic Mediterranean towns, now converged to house souvenir stores and pop brands. The streets were so colorful and so very different from the whitewashed or red brick colonial representations in Hong Kong. Popular restaurants also take after the Portuguese architectural design, while Spanish tiles adorn the whitewashed walls and alleyways. Apart from Heritage Walk, colonial houses can also be seen in Taipa Village, where the government officials used to reside with their respective families. The colorful streets and alleys of Macau are definitely worth exploring. Every now and then, we would come across Chinese watercolors painted on Spanish tiles to depict the pirating history and colonial reign of Macau, which is one of the most interesting representations of cultural merge I've ever seen. And of course, we still found the streets teeming with Cantonese dried goods and street food, ranging from limoncello gelato to fish eggs. The food stands definitely demonstrate cultural diversity.
In the last clip, you will watch the cityscape of Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia. Walking in this city, you will encounter different ethnicities: the Chinese, Malays, Indians, and the migrant workers from Bangladesh. These different races express their cultural vitalities through religions, food, and languages. On the streets, you can see many mosques fill the city, together with Chinese temples and Hindu temples. Besides, don't forget the influence of British colonization in Malaysia. In Kuala Lumpur, you will see again how cultural diversity and cultural memory are embodied and preserved in multilingual roadsides and the hybridity in foods.
We snapped this photo just as we exited the airport in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, as it is a wonderful representation of the different ethnicities gathered here in this nation. Waves of colonization brought the Chinese, Indonesian, Indian, and Malay together to form one of the most diverse countries in the world. Traces of British colonialization can be seen throughout the streets of Malaysia, but in a very non-conventional manner. British colonial-style houses fill the streets, but are painted in the bright, almost fluorescent colors of Malay culture. Though many of the official buildings were built during the reign of the British Empire, the architecture is an interesting mix of British, Indian, and Islamic influence. Islamic religion plays a big part of the Malaysian society, so naturally we saw mosques galore in the city. We also arrived in the middle of Ramadan, where usually schedules were pushed back to accommodate time for morning prayers. The exotic beauty of mosques was quite captivating, though we were not allowed to enter for photographs. I was quite happy to collect shots of different mosques we encountered instead. And I absolutely adored the domed mosques and could not stop taking photos. The hidden buildings nestled in forestry felt like a scene out of Arabian Nights, combining modern streamlines and Arabian history into one gorgeous demonstration of architecture. As we followed the multilingual signs around the city, we came to the area known as Little India. Though I've never been to the country, Little India gave me a great demonstration of the wonderful Hindu culture and amazingly savory food. We wandered around the area that afternoon, taking in the sights and smells of Indian spices and rich color. Enjoying the street food and Indian hospitality, I was quite blown away by how Little India was just steps away from Islamic banks and Chinese seafood restaurants, as I emerged from one cultural representation to the next. Chinese colonization of Malaysia led to Chinese Malaysians being the primary ethnic group in the country. The architectural style of southern China was evident in some of the older buildings we encountered, while Chinese signs were winking at us from every corner. Despite the many diverse cultures in the country, the magic of Malaysia to me is seeing the different racial or religious groups coexist harmoniously with each other, bringing Chinese subtlety to gently incorporate the Indian and Islamic culture, forming a hybridity that is particularly evident in the Malaysian food scene. While food in Malaysia is quite heavily influenced by the Hindu and the Arabic, even Chinese cooking incorporates curry into its traditional spices. Though pork is still purchasable, most restaurants serve halal cuisine catering to the need of Muslim patrons. Food is definitely a primary representation of culture, and one that is accessible to all, which is why I always try to eat locally when traveling. For a taste of Malaysian cooking in Kaohsiung, one can visit Curry Mochi restaurant in Zoying. Mochi, the restaurant's owner, believes that there is a cultural memory in every dish. A memory that is preserved in taste and texture of food.
After watching this video, hope you already got the idea of how to complete your final project and learn some useful words to introduce Hamasan to the world. Good luck with everything!